Good evening to tonight's Dock and Talk, our interview series where we interview personalities who have something to say about leadership, about management, and about logistics. And tonight I am very happy to have with us Rolf Habben Jansen, CEO from Hapag-Lloyd. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking the time. You're a CEO now for 10 years of Hapag-Lloyd, so it's kind of an anniversary. Maybe briefly, Hapag-Lloyd, more than 16,000 employees, active in 130 countries, or more than 130 countries, and you are the world's fifth biggest shipping and container transportation company. You work in logistics all your life. You started at Royal Lloyd's. I think you also worked a little bit for DHL. So my first question would be, when you started in the logistics sector, I think you started as a management trainee at Lloyd's. How did that happen? Why this job or traineeship? What was attractive about this job?
I think I just thought, I always, to be honest, when I came from university, I had studied economics. Yeah. And the big problem with economics is that you really don't learn anything, right? You learn to think a little bit logically, but you don't have any specialized technical knowledge or something like that. So I was looking to work in a sector where you could probably get quite far if you just apply common sense. And I thought that logistics was a good starting point. And I studied in Rotterdam, so I really wanted to work at Lloyd, yeah, which at that point in time was one of the bigger logistics companies in Holland, and then I was lucky enough to get a job as a management trainee. So that's where I started.
Okay, and you stayed then your entire professional life in logistics. So what was the same question essentially? What was so attractive that you stayed, and what's exciting about logistics?
I think logistics and also shipping, I think is an absolutely fascinating industry because it is so global, yeah, and you are exposed to everything that happens around the globe. You are exposed to geopolitics, you are exposed to many different countries. You get to work with people from all different backgrounds, nationalities, ages. You get to work with customers from many different countries that all have their own peculiarities. So I think it's absolutely fascinating industry, and nothing is the same. Yeah. No week is the same. That was already the case when I was a trainee, and it's still the case now that I'm working in this job at Hapag.
Any exciting client you have, which you can share, where you say this is really some client who is special, or something you had to ship, some very special thing you had to ship, and where you thought, wow, this is really special?
I mean, I think we've done over the years. We've had many, special things, if you want. I think when I was early on in my career, then I once was confronted with a company that was completely stuck with their business in Frankfurt, and then we offered to take it over in Holland, which meant that we had to implement an ERP and hire 250 people in a 6 weeks period, whilst we only had about 20 people at that point in time. And then we still managed to get that done, yeah, somehow, which of course created also very great team atmosphere, and then we broke all their records in terms of output, yeah, which was, I think that was quite exciting, yeah. Was not so exciting for my wife at the time because I canceled my holiday for that as well. But these type of things sometimes also happen, and then you just have to, give it a go.
But you're still married.
No,
okay, let's forget the question.
I'm still married, but no, but not with the same wife anymore. So.
Okay, so well
but it had nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with this. Okay, and any example? Sorry for that. Anyway, and any like product, or where you had a sleepless night because you thought, if this thing is not arriving at the location where it's supposed to arrive, then we really have a problem.
We've had, I mean, those type of things you experience many times, but I wouldn't, one that really stood out. I know that when I was working at Damco around 2010, we did quite a lot of work for the U.S. military, which needed to then end up in Afghanistan. Yeah, and that was not always easy. I remember once being with that customer in, I think it was in Texas or so, and I think that guy said to me when I came into the room, he said, "Because of you, people are dying." Yeah, I was like, "Wait, because of your performance," which he didn't like so much at that point in time. That was not so funny. But on the other hand, it wasn't really true because the main stuff that we were transporting was toilet paper and stuff like that. So, but sometimes that can be, it can be tough.
Okay. The logistics sector obviously has lots of strength, and this is also what we try to teach our students, because we're not only having programs in logistics, but also in general management. So essentially, we're a business school, but we teach them this specific edge coming from the strength of logistics, of supply chain management. So obviously my question now, because you're a CEO, so you will have the marketing beneath you, you have communications, strategy, finance, etc., HR. So what do you think are the skill sets and the competences you draw from the logistics supply chain management, and because of this skill set, you're a better CEO, better than maybe a marketeer or finance guy?
I mean, I really grew up in logistics. I mean, I think my first job when I was a management trainee was an assistant transportation manager, where I was responsible for managing the drivers of one of the logistics centers. Then I worked as a salesperson. I worked on M&A. I worked on new build projects. I was responsible for warehouses. Then, your responsibility grows. I was responsible for IT and optimization projects for a while, and then you grow in responsibility where you get a country and a group of countries and then a couple of mergers. Then I moved abroad, and that's how your responsibility grows. What I think has always been good for me is that on the logistics side, I've done many things myself as well, from working in a warehouse, being a forklift driver, completing documents myself, doing the initial sales pitches, doing cold calls. And I've done many, many things in that space. And I believe that, to some extent, you still benefit from that today, because today the world is different, but some of the tasks that need to be performed and that are quite tricky, at least I understand, why they are so tricky.
So you're saying you're maybe more hands-on than another CEO because you did that in the past?
I think that these days, you always need to find the balance between, on the one hand, thinking long-term and mid-term. But I do believe that every now and then you also need to be fairly hands-on, even if companies are big. Because if we are not clear from the top, then by the time that ends up on level 3 or 4 in our organization, it has become so blurry, that a lot of people will not know anymore what needed to be done if you are not crystal clear in what you want. And that also sometimes means you have to go into a little bit more detail.
Do you have an example, like where you recently have been very hands-on and maybe drove your teams nuts because you got into something they thought, why is he doing that?
We are going to change. We are going to change the partnership that we have with the companies with whom we work in February. So we are going to change from the alliance into Gemini, which we're going to do together with Maersk. And when I was in Asia just 10 days ago, we were talking about how does the lineup of the ships look, and that really did not look good. And then I do speak up and say, guys, this is not good enough. And then you also find out that everybody takes a little bit of safety here and a little bit of safety there, so that we don't make any mistakes. Yes, but if we don't take any risk, we end up with a lot of open positions. So we will not be able to carry the cargo that we actually need. So then I do step in and also demand that we then get.
Okay, but step in, you say it doesn't look good. But are you kind of suggesting also the new lineup of the ships?
Well, let's say that I do try to give some pointers on where I think that it should be fixed. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I cannot, I cannot tell them how to do it exactly, but I think you can point out that these are the type of things that are just not in the interest of the company. Simple thing. If you look at when do you have open positions, do you have them before Chinese New Year or after Chinese New Year? After Chinese New Year, demand is typically weak. So that's manageable. before Chinese New Year, you get the best rates and the ships are full. So it makes no sense to have a lot of open positions before Chinese New Year and no open positions after Chinese New Year.
Okay, but
yeah, because that's not, that's not in the interest of the overall company. And that means then that you have a little bit more risk that you have an open position maybe somewhere in February. So be it. Yeah. And I do think that, that means that you have to then step in there. And I do that also.
Perfect. So that would be a kind of probably one of the characteristics of your leadership style. Hands-on. Is there anything else you need to do to be as a perfect CEO?
Well, first of all, I'm definitely not perfect. Yeah. I think, it's always, this is a question that you get a lot, right? What is your leadership style and how do, and for me, that's always incredibly difficult to answer. I think if you look at, I try to be transparent, I try to be honest, and I try to be clear. And I expect that also from others. And I try to be data-driven, and I try not to be personal, even if I'm sometimes not happy about something. That's in a way where it starts. As long as you can have people work in a trustful environment, then we can solve a lot of problems. I mean, I come to work every day to do a job, to do an as good as possible job. And I assume that my people do the same. I do not work from the hypothesis that people come to work and say, now I'm going to create a really big mess, right? Because nobody does that, yeah? Everybody comes to work to do something right. And that means that if you get together, you get all the arguments on the table, then in most cases you can take the best decisions for the company. And we need to encourage people to take those decisions, because the worst thing there is take no decisions, yeah? Because then we, tend to discuss for very, very long. And it's much better to decide quickly and then correct if something goes wrong than to talk for too long, yeah, without taking any decisions.
In one of your previous interviews, you said that an employee is allowed to make mistakes. But what you don't like is if they, whenever they make the same mistakes over and over again. So how many mistakes?
You cannot put a logic, but I think, of course, everybody should be allowed to make mistakes or errors, yeah? And then we need to, for me, it's important that we at some point learn from that. I mean, if people make the same mistake over and over and over again, then you have to ask yourself the question whether that person is on the right job and whether there's maybe another job in the company that is better suited for that person, or that he needs some training or coaching or whatever it is. But I think it is important that we learn as an organization and that we don't make the same mistakes all the time, because our competitors are also getting better. And so we also need to make sure that we are at least somewhat of a learning organization.
Any example which you could share where you made the same mistake twice?
I'm sure I probably made the same mistake
many times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a quick example now, but I mean, then I would still go back to, earlier in my career. I mean, the first job I had, I was responsible for giving guidance to a group of 40 truck drivers, yeah, and they had a tendency to every now and then not do what you want, right, yeah, and which is not always so nice, yeah. And then what you learn very quickly is that in the beginning you try to be very nice to them, yeah, and you try to, oh yeah, no, I understand, and okay, let's do better next time, and you solve the problem. If you do that twice, then they think that they have won. Right? And I have for sure, that for me was a very difficult period in the beginning, because there's many of those type of things which you have learned in university, which really don't work in real life, yeah? Because there people sometimes do have the intention to try and, you're a young guy, sits there, 25 years old, and now I'm going to demonstrate who really has the power. But it's also a very nice learning experience, because, you cannot make the same mistake. You can do it twice and 3 times, and I probably also did, but not 5 times.
Okay. So you got clearer in your.
Yeah, but that's all. Yeah. That's actually quite difficult. But yeah, it's the only way. Yeah.
You also said once in an interview that whenever you get a new position, obviously you have the direct reports who are already in place, and you need to work with what you have, kind of. Now you're in 10 years in your position, so I guess there was a lot of turnover. How do you choose your direct reports? Is it kind of you're looking for people who are complementary to you, you're looking for people who are the same, or you're looking for people who are completely different?
In the end, I think you need to build teams, so you need to build people that have complementary skills. But to your first point, I do think that whenever you get in a leadership position, in principle, you have to work with the people that are there. And then you need to make a strong team out of it, because your predecessor probably also thought that they were a good team. I really don't like it when you have managers that whenever they come in, they start replacing everybody. I just don't think that's good leadership. I think good leadership is you take on a team, and then yes, you may have to identify that in one or the other case you have to make some changes, or you have to rotate some people, and then over time you build a better team. And yes, every now and then you may have a case where it really doesn't work, and then you should not be afraid to take action to that too. But in principle, you get a team, and I've always done that. I've always taken over the team that was there and then tried to make that better over time. If you look at the team that I have now at Hapag, of course, now that I'm there for 11 years, many people have changed, or have moved into different roles. But that's something that goes very logical. And every year, I think if I look at the executive committee, which is the top 14, 15 of Hapag-Lloyd, we have probably 1 or 2 changes every year, because somebody retires or somebody moves into another job, and I think that's actually quite good.
You also said you want to have a constructive critique, but obviously as the CEO you not necessarily get the transparency or the honesty of people telling you, well, this was really not good. Are you actively encouraging such a culture? Are you asking people, tell me now, or how do you do that people actually tell you the truth?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult because, whether we like it or not, there's a lot of people that don't tell the CEO the truth.
Yeah, I know.
Which is very irritating. Yeah, but it's not something that you can really change or influence all that much. I ask for feedback often when I do my appraisals with all my direct reports at the end of the year. I tell them, tell me also what you think I should do better. And then it's still, in many cases, it's still relatively quiet, which is a pity. But at least I try to encourage that also in one-to-one meetings. And I think what you see is that probably the people that work closer and more often with me give you more of that feedback than the ones that are a little bit more remote. Also because I think with the ones that for a longer period of time, then in the end, that does get better. But it is a real problem that people don't tell board members or CEOs the truth.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you build a relationship of trust in the end. Mm. Okay. Anything you could share where somebody told you something very bad? Like where they said, well, this is so wrong, which destabilized you maybe then? I would not know, something. I think we've won. The thing that really destabilized me a bit was during when we had COVID. Then we had a very significant compliance case in one of our biggest countries, which was a real problem. Yeah, because also the managing director of that unit was involved. Mm-hmm. So then in the end we had to say goodbye to him. Yeah, and we had to in the end try to get him to Hamburg, and that really didn't work. And that's something that then turned out to be really bad. Yeah, which we had hoped it was not, but it was in the end. In the end, we then had to say goodbye, and then I had to do it by video, which is really bad. Yeah. But I think the fact that came up, and it was in an order of magnitude that we had not expected, that was really not so great. Yeah. Different question, but maybe also not the easiest. When you took over Hapag-Lloyd, you took it over from Michael Behrendt. And he then became the chairman of the supervisory board. So he kind of controlled what you were doing. which can be an advantage and which can also be a nightmare. What was your case?
For me, it was an advantage, because Michael Behrendt and I are very, very different, but we're also very complementary. And I think we have a very similar view when it's around what should be the strategy of Hapag-Lloyd and how can we be successful. And I think we both want the best for Hapag-Lloyd, but our focus is completely different. I mean, I'm, for example, significantly more hands-on and I travel a lot more, and where he takes care of other tasks. And I think that has really worked really well from day one. So for us, it's been, I think, and also for Hapag, I think it's been really good that it worked in the combination between Michael and myself.
Related to this topic, Michael Behrendt obviously is part of the Hamburg ecosystem, and you arrived from outside. Was that something that was difficult at that point of time, that Hapag-Lloyd suddenly had a CEO who was not within this Hamburg ecosystem, who was maybe also not connected in an emotional way to Hamburg?
I don't know. You probably have to ask other people, whether that was difficult.
That's always a way of responding.
No, but I mean, in fairness, I think for me it has never been a really big. I've never had any real big problem with that. But I know that. But I know that in the beginning there were a lot of people that were looking at, okay, what is this Dutch guy from logistics going to do in shipping? Of course, but that is something But I must say it has never bothered me. I've always also felt very welcome at Hapag-Lloyd, by the team at Hapag-Lloyd, and also by Behrendt, for example. And as far as the Hamburg ecosystem is, Hamburg is a big logistics and shipping center. So you have a lot of people that you meet. On a regular basis. And meantime, I know most of them also fairly well. And that's okay.
Yeah, but then, decisions sometimes are made, because it's not only Michael Behrendt, but there's also Klaus-Michael Kühne in this ecosystem, also a huge supporter and fan of Hamburg. And sometimes you have to take decisions which are maybe very good for Hapag-Lloyd, but maybe not so perfect for Hamburg. And this certainly has changed with you coming, not having this attachment to Hamburg.
Yeah, but I've always said that, Hamburg is still is where our headquarters is, and it's also the biggest port that we serve. I also think, though, that my job is not to make Hamburg happy. My job is to make sure that Hapag-Lloyd performs well, and over time Hamburg will benefit from that too. If you look at the amount of cargo that we bring to Hamburg today, and you compare that to where we started. When I started, we brought to Hamburg, I think, 1.2 or 1.3 million TEUs a year. Today, we bring well over 2 million TEUs to Hamburg port. So I don't think that has been bad news for Hamburg. And I'm also certainly not against Hamburg. I think, it's a wonderful city. I lived there for 10 years. We have 2,000 great people that work for us here. It's also a workforce that has grown. We're the biggest customer of the port. I just think that, with us as a global container line, then we have to look at the things that are important for us and how we optimize our business globally. And that means that not every answer there starts with Hamburg.
You coming from Rotterdam, huge port harbor. So if you compare the harbor of Rotterdam with the one in Hamburg, differences, advantages, strength, and the city itself?
I think, in a way, it's very nice that the port of Hamburg is still so close to the city, because I think that creates a bit of a special atmosphere in the city. But of course, logistically, it's not ideal. If you compare Rotterdam to Hamburg, Rotterdam moved the port out to Maasvlakte, I think 30 plus years ago. And because of that, now at Maasvlakte, it has grown like crazy, and it's also a very big transshipment port. Hamburg will never be a transshipment port, but can still be a good gateway port. But that does not have the potential to become a port of 15 million or 20 million TEUs as you see in Rotterdam.
And the city?
Well, I think both cities are very nice. I was born very close to Rotterdam, so of course I like the city a lot. I also think Rotterdam has become a lot nicer over the last 10, 20 years. But I also like Hamburg a lot. Hamburg it's a very easy city to live in. It's very green. It has a lot of very nice corners, lots of nice restaurants, nice people. So, yeah, I'm happy. Yeah.
You said before that you need to decide that Hapag-Lloyd globally is doing well. Connected to that, how political is your position as a CEO? So how much lobbying, politics you need to play? And do you think in your position it's more important to play the political game in Hamburg or in globally in other countries?
And I think we try to spend as little time as possible on politics. Yeah. Also because we can only influence it to some extent. We play an active role in, for example, I've been the co-chairman of the World Shipping Council for a long time. That also means we have a role versus regulators, and I think that's where we have to position ourselves as an industry. That we certainly do. And then, of course, in Hamburg, because we have a little bit this special position in Hamburg, then we talk to the politicians in Hamburg also on a regular basis. But I also think that, sometimes people think that that's a bigger task or takes a lot more time from us than it in reality does. I mean, if I speak to the senators or the mayor twice a year, yeah, that's probably it.
But you see them then in the city hall?
Sometimes they are, but I mean, like last week, we had Chencha visiting us in the Ballendam. So sometimes we meet there, sometimes we meet in City Hall. Yeah.
And you're happy with what Hamburg does for the port?
I've said many times that Hamburg has to take their own decisions around what they want to do with the port and what they want to do with Hala. I think it's not a secret that we had proposed something else, but in the end, the city is completely entitled to do that. I mean, they are the majority owner of Hala. They have taken the decisions that they wanted. Whether that's right or wrong, the future will tell. Yeah. We just need to make sure that in that new construct, we protect also the rights of Hapag-Lloyd, and that's also what we did.
There you talk about MSC,
yeah,
and that they preferred MSC to Hapag-Lloyd. And by accident, I saw the day afterwards, I saw you in a speech, giving a speech on there. You were a little bit more critique. You said, well, we can also put some of the containers somewhere else. We don't need to have everything in Hamburg. But then, because I looked it up, and afterwards you very quickly got calmer and said, well, okay, there's decision, not the decision I preferred. So is that also like kind of your character, because you're very much in sports, into sports, and you like in soccer you like to be the defense role. In ice hockey, which is I think your most preferred sports, you like being aggressive and the fastness and the quickness of the game. So is that kind of that you would like to be more aggressive in your own, but you're rather playing the defense game?
No, I think I would like to, I try to focus my energy on those things that I can influence. If the city of Hamburg decides to sell 49.9% of Hala to MSC, I cannot influence it. It's their decision. So then I just need to live with that. Yeah. There's many other things that we actually can influence and that we also can control. Okay, and then of course you try to do whatever you can to develop the company as quickly as you can, but also still being, cautious and conservative. I think we are very different than an MSC or CMA, which are family-controlled or family-owned companies, where you see that they would, in difficult times, they take a lot more risk than we would do, whereas we would always say, we try to keep the company stable, we try to develop it year after year after year, but we also want to secure that the company is still there in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years from today.
Have you always been so calm about these things, or is that experience and you learned that?
It's also a little, I don't know. I'm not always calm, but I'm usually calm. But I can also be, like everybody probably. Sometimes you can get really upset or
Yeah, okay, but that's what I wanted to say before, because in the speech I saw you the day after, or maybe even the same day when the city decided that, you were still calm, but we felt that there is a little bit annoyment in there, but that's kind of then, if I understand correctly, your way of this. Maybe like 1 hour, 2 hours of where you're a little bit less calm, but then you come back quite quickly to.
Yeah, I think many of my managers have always said that my body language is not the greatest. Yeah, because you can always see quite clearly when I like something, yes or no, and it's probably better now than it was 20 years ago. But it's on the other hand, that's also a little bit who I am. With me, it is what you see is what you get. That's also easy for me, and it's also easy, I think, for people that work with me, because I think you normally don't need to doubt very long what my viewers or how I think about something.
Which can be huge advantage, but which can also lead to some awkward situations, obviously. Yeah. But that's how it is. Okay. Topic change, sustainability. Often the shipping industry is criticized because not so sustainable. So how do you see this whole sustainability discussion? What is Hapag-Lloyd doing to become more sustainable? I think 2045 is deadline.
First of all, I think shipping is actually quite a environmentally friendly mode of transport. If you look at the data, that also goes for us. Nevertheless, we emit, I think this year we emit 17 million tons of CO2. So that's actually quite a lot. Yeah. So of course we need to do something about that, and we need to find ways to become more efficient and reduce those emissions. I think we've set ourselves ambitious targets, both towards 2045, but also towards 2030, when we need to bring the absolute emissions down with about a third, which is really not a small task, because we expect to grow until 2030. So we need to bring down emissions per container or per transported unit significantly more. I do believe that it can be done. We do that by taking out old and inefficient ships and replacing them by new and more efficient ships. We do that by upgrading existing ships. We try to design the network better. We try to push better asset utilization, and we also try to find or get access to green fuels. But it's not easy, because especially the green fuels that everybody talks about, there's just not enough of it. Yeah, there's significantly more ships that can sail on green fuels than that there is green fuel, and it will stay like that for the next 5 or 10 years. And that means that you also have to look at these other levers. And I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about efficiency, but efficiency is the most important lever that we have over the next 10 years. Just to give you an example, we just ordered 24 new ships that are going to replace existing ships. The emissions of those new ships are going to be more than 40% less per container than the old ships that they will replace. So there's a lot that you can do just by modernizing, because then you need less fuel and you can also bring those emissions down. And as long as we don't have enough green fuels available, we will also have to find ways to become more efficient, which will anyway mean that we also need less green fuels, which is a good thing, because then we will reach that equilibrium between supply and demand earlier.
What happens to the old ships? Is there something like a graveyard, like for airplanes?
Most of the ships get recycled or dismantled, because the steel still has a value and can be reused. So most of ships get recycled.
Okay. And energy-wise, what do you think about nuclear energy? And is that a solution for Germany also, for Hapag-Lloyd as a German company?
I've been quite, and you know that, of course, because you seem well prepared for the interview. Yeah, that I've said that I do see nuclear as an alternative midterm, for large container ships. If you look at the modern molten salt technology, that is very different than the nuclear that we always talk about. And I would certainly not rule out that when we fast forward 10 or 15 years, that there will be commercially viable solutions for large container ships. And let's not forget, I mean, the nuclear, the sentiment around nuclear with many people is not so great. But coming back to what I said earlier in terms of when you want to take decisions, it's very important to look at data, and it's very important to look at the facts. And I have said that on nuclear, for example, I believe that we should do more R&D to see if we can do it in a safe way. And if that is the case, then I would certainly not rule it out, because if you could apply that to large container ships, you could sail faster. Yeah, you would not have to bunker. Your emissions would go to zero, and you also need less ships. So there's a lot of pluses around it. So before we say, let's not do that because of the wrong reasons, let's at least investigate it.
Do you think that such a decision is easier for a company like CMR, because it's a French company and they have another grasp on this topic?
I don't think so. I also think that I also expect that in 2035, the opinion here in Germany will have changed.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna see that. I'm gonna re-invite you in 25 years to.
But honestly, but I know that sounds a bit. I say it also to be a little bit provocative on that. But people talk about nuclear, without really getting into the details of what kind of technology are we talking about, because everybody thinks that if it gets into the wrong hands, we have another Fukushima or Chernobyl. With some of these technologies, that's just technically not even possible. So that's why you need to, in my view, do a lot more research and test and see if it works. And maybe it is only allowed later on between China and the US or between other countries. But then it can still give a contribution to decarbonizing our industry, because that means that at least on those trades, we will then not need other ships.
Okay. Understood. At some point, because in your supervisory board, I don't know if it's still the case, there were or are two guys from Chile. And back then you said you started to learn Spanish because of politeness, to be polite. So first question would be, how far did you get in your Spanish? And second question, did you do anything else for politeness reasons where you said, okay, I need to learn that to be polite too?
I mean, my Spanish is still not particularly good, but I understand quite a bit in terms of I'm understanding enough to become a little bit dangerous, I think, for them. So that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, apart from that, I think what you just try to do is build up good relationship with the key stakeholders. So, we go and visit them in Chile. We go and spend time with Mr. Kuhne. We spend time with the city, because those are the controlling shareholders of Hapag-Lloyd. And it's important that we stay very coordinated and aligned with them about what we want to do going forward, because that's the easiest way to also get their support.
Yeah. You're now the CEO for 11 years. Your contract is going until 2027. Are you thinking about what's next? I mean, obviously, or because you can't respond to that question, but are you sometimes thinking, maybe I'll do something else in my life?
Yeah, maybe.
Professional life.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, my contract runs until 29 actually, so yeah, so it still runs for a few more years. But of course, you sometimes think about, would be nice maybe to do something else after that, or maybe also not. I mean, I've never really planned I've never thought very much about what do I want to do in 5 years or what do I want to do in 10 years, and we'll see. I mean, for now we have a lot of work ahead of us for the upcoming couple of years to move into that partnership with Maersk and to build up our terminal business and do a number of other things. And then at some stage, I'm sure that there will be a discussion also with the controlling shareholders about what makes sense. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also good that after I've done it for 14 or 15 years, that somebody else takes over, and that's totally fine. Yeah.
Well, Angela Merkel did it for 16 years, so you could go.
Yeah, but not everybody is of the opinion that that she should have done it for 16 years, probably. So you want to try and be ahead of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you hadn't gone into logistics, is there any other domain you would have gone then?
Difficult to say. I mean, as I said to you before we started, I was a teacher for a number of years. So maybe I would have ended up in university or or as a teacher. I can certainly not rule that out. Looking at my family, we have a fair number of teachers around. So
and just
that would have been a
Yeah, Rolf before this talk said he would like to teach some courses. So I think we're going to make that happen, that you can at least from time to time teach at KLU. I think that would be great. Last question maybe. What is the achievement in your professional life where you're the most proud of in the last, decades?
I think that if you look at I think I'm quite proud of what we did at Hapag-Lloyd in the first 5-6 years of my tenure, because Hapag was in a very difficult position when I joined in 2014, and we did 2 very big mergers at that time with all the risks that were associated to that, in a very difficult market environment. And I think from 14 to 19, the market was very tough, but we did a very good job with the team to integrate CSFE and to merge with UASC and do a couple of smaller transactions. And by doing that, bring our cost base to where it belonged and also make our profitability very much in line with the industry. From 2020 till today, it's also been a very interesting ride, but a bit more made by external circumstances than by our own doing. And I know we are doing a lot of things also ourselves, but the last 5 years, what happened in the market has dominated more what we could influence and do ourselves. And that's why I probably look back with, some, I don't know. Well, I think we've done a good job in the first 5-6 years, particularly also after that. But the first 5-6 were quite decisive, because at that point in time, we were just going through a very difficult period where the balance sheet of the company was very weak. Today, we are in a completely different situation, but we were also just before COVID.
Is there one day you remember where you said, now we made it? Or is it just a period?
I think for me, what was very important, but that was because I personally was so convinced about that was the right thing to do, is when we got the support from our shareholders to do the merger with UASC. I was very convinced that was a deal that we had to do. And it was not easy to get everybody on board with that. But when we got that done, then I was very confident that we would be able to further improve the business, no matter what would happen to the market. And in the end, that also happened. But that was probably that was also a very tough time to get that all done. But I was very happy when we got that through.
Thank you very much, Rolf Habben Jansen, for this interview. Now we go over to questions from you.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. I have a question. So you said that logistics is one of those fields where you just need common sense. Then do you think it makes sense for us to do a 2-year degree in logistics?
It does, because in the end, I maybe said it a little bit, but I think what you learn, at least when I graduated in economics, and it's a little bit the same if you go about logistics, it learns you a certain way of thinking. What I meant to say is that, I also did, I tried to also do physics, for a year, but that was just too difficult for me. I was just not good enough in some of that math, and I don't think I would be able to build up that technical know-how that you need if you want to become an engineer or if you want to work in the chemicals segment. And if you come from a more general education like economics or logistics, I think one of the things you really learn is to apply common sense and do that also in a structured manner. And in order to learn that, you still need to have some education. I was more coming from the point that I don't know anything about chemistry. I don't know anything about physics. I don't know how to design a bridge or be an architect. So you have a lot of sectors that are then probably not a logical place to start. Yeah. Whereas when you look at shipping and logistics, there's a lot of the general things that you learn that you can build on.
So if you look at two CVs, one did a marketing degree and one from logistics degree for Hapag-Lloyd for opening position, for example, then you would rate them the same?
I mean, it depends a little bit. Depends, of course, also what kind of, you look at what kind of education do people have, but you also look at what kind of job are we looking at. I mean, if we would be looking in something in the network or something in container steering or so, then you would probably look at someone with a logistics background. Whereas if I would be looking for somebody in the sales side or to drive our digital adoption, then you would probably more go to someone with a marketing background.
Buenas noches, me alegra saber que ha estado aprendiendo español. Bienvenido a KLU. My name is Cindy, I'm from Colombia. I am a master's student in logistics in KLU. And I had the honor to attend the last naming ceremony of the Hamburg Express. It was massive. And at that moment, I said, okay, maybe in the future I have the opportunity to ask, because I heard your speech at that moment. What are considered is the main challenges that the maritime shipping face in the next 10 years? Especially because right now, the configuration of the entirely global supply chain in geopolitically, you said that is entirely true, affect every day the speed of the market in the industry. What do you think is the main challenge and how Hapag-Lloyd try to face that?
I would say there's probably three main things. One we already talked about, which is sustainability and decarbonization of our industry, because that will drive a lot of the investment decisions that we will have to make. The second one is geopolitics, whether we like it or not. It's very difficult to prepare for any of that, but what they do and how they behave does influence global trade. It may sometimes help to accelerate trade growth, but it may also sometimes slow it down. It can also change trade flows. And then the last thing is simple supply and demand. In our business is very volatile, and the balance between supply and demand in the end drives whether you can make money, yes or no, and where prices are going to be. So in our business, you will always be busy with supply and demand. I think the geopolitics have become increasingly important. And the third thing I would say is sustainability. Those would be the three themes that I would pick out. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. You talked before how your career has influenced and shaped your leadership style. I was wondering whether you had any experiences outside of your professional life or activities that you see as valuable in shaping your leadership style.
Yeah, I think there's always. I think everybody gets impacted by what they do throughout their entire life. And if I would say what are two other things, one is I think what was already mentioned before is sport. Yeah, I've done quite a lot of sport, and most of it was actually always team sport. Yeah, so I was very much into soccer for quite a long time, and I think that has certainly shaped the way that you get an idea about how can you be successful. And I think the other thing are probably your children. Yeah, I mean, I have two daughters that are 26 and 28 years old, and you see them certainly also the last 10-15 years, you can really see that they are giving you also perspective from how do different generations look at things that happen, and that certainly also influences how you behave at work.
Hi, I'm from Chile actually, KLU and Hapag-Lloyd. So there it is. So if you allow me, I want to ask something a little bit more personal on the leadership role. So in the new generations, we have heard that more and more people are actually not so willing to climb the ladder and go into upper positions because then you sacrifice a lot of things, right? So I wanted to know, what are you sacrifice for your position, your top management position, right? If it is worth it, and if you recommend it until what point, right?
Of course, everybody always needs to make choices in life about what you want to do and what you do not want to do. I'm a firm believer that whatever you decide to do, whether that's at work or somewhere else, do it with passion, right? Try to do something because you like it. Yeah, I mean, I've worked my whole life in logistics and shipping, and I still love it because it's a fantastic industry. You get a lot of positive things around it. Do you also have to make some sacrifices? Yes, that's how it is. You can't have your cake and eat it, right? And I don't regret many of the choices that I have made. Could it have gone different? Could I have done some things better? Of course, but on the other hand, I think I've always tried, as I said, I try to be my best self when I'm at work. I also try to be my best self when I'm at home. Yeah. And I think I've always been pretty good in, separating work and life when I'm at home. At least that's what my children, tell me, and they are probably the best, judge, a judge of that. So, at least I can live with the choices that I've made, and I know that also means that sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes you see, in my first marriage, my first wife and I, we really, started to be more and more apart. And in the end, that had probably also something to do with the life that we were leading, or the life that I was leading. So I certainly had also part of that responsibility. But in the end, that's sometimes how it goes. And I just believe that do something with passion, that's the best thing. And do things that you like, and then just give it 100%, both privately and at work.
Hi, thanks a lot for the great talk. I have a question. I actually yesterday submitted a paper for my supply chain strategy course regarding the impact of global disruptions on globalized supply chains, and you already briefly touched upon this. How relevant are geopolitical issues, geopolitical movements in your role for your strategy, and how concrete do you monitor them? For example, in the paper I wrote, I performed a case study on the Red Sea crisis, which was of course highly relevant also for Hapag-Lloyd. How strongly do you monitor this?
Well, we monitor it. It's just the thing about all these geopolitical events is that they are totally unpredictable. Yeah, I mean, we had a session with retirees, retired managers from. And I said, last year we were together, and then we looked into a very difficult 2024, and then 3 days later, the whole Red Sea crisis started. Yeah, and now the year has again unfolded completely different. Of course, we've seen the same in a way around COVID. Yeah, so we have to deal with these type of things. I don't think, our shareholders have sometimes asked us, can you not work out a couple of scenarios, right? And I always say no. Because, this makes it's theoretically makes sense, but it's practically useless. Yeah, because then you can work out 5 or 6 scenarios, and in the end, something completely different will come. So you need to develop that capability to react and to be agile when something happens. And as long as you can do that, then I think you can react also on these type of things. I thought, for example, that at Hapag, we reacted a lot better on the Red Sea crisis than we did on COVID, because we have learned as an organization how to deal with these things. So we communicated a lot better internally. We communicated a lot better with our customers, and we took decisions also a lot faster. And that's, I think, then in a way, quite nice to see, because that's that type of learning organization that in the end you would like to become.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, my name is Alexandra. We already talked about sustainability and decarbonization a lot today, but we also know about this trend in 2024 about the European Union trading emission system. How does the Hapag-Lloyd actually measuring all of this, and how did it influence actually this year at the company?
Yeah, I mean the EU ETS, of course, is in a way it's a tax that's being imposed on us. That's in 3 steps, 40, 70 to 100%. going to be implemented from 24, 25, 26. At the moment, we just we buy the rights that we need to buy, and we pass the cost on to the customer. And it influences our decisions only to a very limited extent. I also think that imposing those type of rules on a regional or national basis is just not a good idea, because it creates inequality. It prevents us from acting on a true level playing field. There's a lot of pitfalls to these type of regulations, and people can always find ways to circumvent them to a too large extent. And I think that's why we always say, let's try and set those rules through the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, because they're the only globally ruling body. Yeah, most of the other things only make limited sense, even if they sound quite good, for the politicians when they say we have done something. Yeah, but I remember when I was in Brussels and was talking to some of the politicians and said, I think this new law has actually quite a lot of pitfalls. And then they say, yes, we know, but we still felt that we had to do something. And whilst I have some sympathy for that viewpoint, I also think that when you do these type of things, and especially when you come up with new legislation, it's quite important that it is also roughly right. Yeah? Because just doing something is admirable from, from putting in an effort type of perspective, but I still think it's important that you get it roughly right too, because otherwise it creates the wrong type of behavior. And I don't think that we always get it right with these type of things. It's a bit of a long answer to a short question, but yeah.
Thanks. So, nuclear-powered shipping. What do you think are the biggest hurdles to get that implemented? Because both the French and the American military, at least, already uses it.
Yeah, well, by what you shouldn't forget is that the nuclear technology that I was referring to is a very different technology than the nuclear technology that is used by aircraft carriers and submarines. Yeah, because that's more the traditional nuclear energy, where this is more the molten salt type of technology, which is just by definition a lot less dangerous. If it is about what is going to decide whether that's going to be implemented, I think there's going to be a combination of, can we make it economically viable based on the research that is being done at the moment? The answer to that looks like probably, yeah. And then of course we need to make sure that it's being, that it will be allowed. But there I am very optimistic because in the end, facts will win from emotion. And that may not mean that it will be allowed everywhere, yeah. But there will certainly be trades where that will be accepted. And once that gets more and more accepted and people get to understand more and more and more of the technology, I think there is a good chance that in the 40s, yeah, we'll see a fair number of ships with that type of technology.
So to that extent, you also said that you might see it on routes such as in America and in China. So not necessarily Europe. Would you say, generally speaking, we might regulate too much in Europe?
I mean, Europe certainly regulates a fair bit, yeah, and so does Germany, yeah. By the way, I also think, but I think though that when you talk about nuclear, I think that if it comes, it will also come to Europe. I don't think it's probably not going to come in every port, but I do think that we will also see it in Europe, simply because in the end, it will be a technology that, if the research turns out positive, then it will be something that will be approved. Yeah. There's a lot of power behind it from governments like the US. I'm sure that France, China, and others will also be positive towards it. So at some point in time, it will very likely come.
Thank you. And the last one, is this more like from your point of view, or also Hapag's point of view?
I think that's probably both. I mean, when I talk to, when we talk about this topic in the management board, or when we talk to our colleagues in fleet and in fuel procurement, I think all of us are pretty aligned on the fact that we should thoroughly investigated, yeah, because we think there is a chance that it can work. Whether in the end there will be a positive outcome, we don't know, yeah. But we are following it very closely, and we are at least open to look at it. And in the end, you know, we need to do what's best for the globe, yeah. And I think what I said before, you need to be very cautious to rule out certain solutions too early on in the process, just because it has a negative emotional connection, or because you have a negative memory, yeah, associated to it.
Thank you.
Maybe one last question.
Yeah, thank you again. And as a CEO now, where everyone expects you to basically be the best at everything and have no doubts, to whom or where do you look for guidance when you have something that you're not so sure of?
Well, I mean, you know, first and foremost, probably my colleagues in the board, yeah, because I think we have quite a good and trustful relationship with the colleagues in the board. So if there's, and then apart from that, however, you know, sometimes it also helps to talk to some family or friends or my wife, yeah, about, you know, certain doubts that you have. But I would say the ones that give me the best guidance is typically the, you know, are the colleagues that we have in the board, and sometimes also representatives of the shareholders or people in the supervisory board. I've had also someone who acted as a little bit as a, you know, as a coach or a mentor for some time, but in fairness, I have not made a lot of use of that the last probably 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time, for your transparency. I think we learned quite a lot. Thank you to you guys for watching to tonight's or KLU's Dock Talk interview series tonight with Rolf Habben Jansen, CEO from Hapag-Lloyd.